Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. Well now, friend, pull up a chair and make yourself at home. I don't often talk about what went down in El Cielo, but since you asked, and since you've already been kind enough to order me a drink, I'll spin the yarn. I can't promise it'll be pretty, but I can promise it's real. It changed the way I see this dusty old border country forever. Where to start? Let's see. My name's Thomas, or Old Tom if you prefer. I was a gunslinger in my younger days, guarded stagecoaches, worked a job or two I'm not too proud of, and eventually decided I was tired of living by the draw. I found a tiny patch of land near a place called El Cielo, hoping to spend my twilight years raising a few chickens, maybe a goat or two, and drinking coffee on the porch at sunrise. Figured I'd die quietly under that big Texas sky. But fate sure had a different plan. I can see that curious look in your eye. Don't worry, I'm getting to the good part. Let's top off our glasses first, though. Another round for the both of us, barkeep. Cheers. Now, El Cielo wasn't ever a bustling metropolis. It barely qualified as a town. Picture a wide main street of hard-packed dirt, a single saloon hotel with a weathered sign, a general store run by a stubborn old fellow, and a few scattered adobe homes around a small mission church. Oh, there was also a funeral parlor on the far end, run by a man named Ramirez. That's about it. No fancy sheriff's office or official bank. You could pass through and blink twice and miss the whole place. I took up residence maybe a mile outside town limits, in a rough wooden cabin I built myself. Fixed up the roof every couple years, fed a horse named Jesse, and waved howdy to any soul crossing my land. Saw the occasional traveler heading toward Fort Quitman, or aiming for the old stage route into New Mexico. My life was as calm as the desert breeze, most days. Back then, I didn't have many visitors. So when strange rumors started floating around about folks wandering into town looking half dead, I figured it was just tall tales. That's the thing. In the frontier, folks like to spin ghost stories. But what I heard was different. Witnesses claimed they saw travelers stumbling in with lifeless eyes, refusing water or rest, then wandering off again. Even then, I chalked it up to heat stroke or dehydration. You get plenty of that in the desert. But rumors kept piling up until the morning I rode into town for supplies and bumped into something downright unnatural. Let me take a swig of this drink and gather my thoughts. It's not an easy tale to revisit. I recall it was hot, the kind of heat that makes you squint and forget what a cold breeze feels like. I left Jessie by the hitching post in front of the saloon, gave her an extra pat because she'd been good about hauling me through the dusty trail. Then I went in for a morning coffee. Yes, a saloon can serve coffee too, especially in a town that small. Less competition. The barkeep, Wyatt, noticed me right away. He had a habit of staying up half the night, so he usually looked tired, but that day he seemed downright spooked. Before I could even say hello, he leaned over the bar and said, "Tom, you heard about the trouble last night?" I asked him to clarify. He got cagey, glancing around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. "There was a fella stumbled through town around midnight," he murmured. Didn't speak a word, eyes like a corpse, if you believe the folks who saw him. A couple of ranch hands tried to help, but he, well, didn't take kindly to them. Then he just disappeared. Poof. I took my coffee and felt an odd stillness in the saloon. Two other patrons at a corner table stared into their mugs. One of them shot me a nervous glance. I shrugged it off. People can get carried away, especially under an orange desert moon. Still, the tension in the air clung like dust on a sweat-soaked shirt. Something was stirring under the surface. I can't claim I recognized the gravity of it then, but I felt a nudge of unease telling me to keep my eyes open. After that short chat with Wyatt, I moseyed over to the general store. A grey-haired Irishman named McCloskey owned it. He was usually cheery, but on that morning He was so wound up he nearly dropped the tin of nails I asked for. "Tom, you best be careful out there," he said quietly, rummaging under the counter for a small bag of flour I needed. "Things aren't normal right now." I asked him to elaborate. He sighed, then explained. "Folks are saying more travelers keep showing up acting. How do I put this? Not right. Some near the east well last night, and maybe 1 or 2 by the old mission. It's scaring the townsfolk. No one knows if it's a sickness or something worse." I tried to brush it off with a joke, something about folks always chasing wild stories, but McCloskey just frowned. "This is different," he insisted. "You'll see." That comment stuck in my head. "You'll see." It was like he was warning me. I grabbed my supplies, thanked him, and stepped back outside. The street seemed quieter than usual, like even the stray dogs decided to stay hidden. I had an odd feeling that maybe I should head home, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to poke around, find out what was making everyone jumpy. El Cielo's mission was a humble structure, adobe walls and a short bell tower that rang on Sundays. Father Delgado, a kind-hearted older priest, lived there. He tended a small garden and oversaw a minuscule graveyard out back, used for travelers who died on the road with no family to claim them. I found Delgado in the courtyard, talking with a couple of townspeople. They were in the midst of a heated discussion. One man insisted that the priest do something about these pale wanderers, while Delgado tried to keep the peace. When Delgado spotted me, he beckoned me over. "Tom, we could use your help. Word is you used to be handy in a fight." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm retired, Father. I don't go around picking fights. What's going on?" He led me inside, keeping his voice low. "A woman showed up earlier this morning. She wouldn't talk or eat, just stood in the corner, unresponsive. We tried to move her to a bed, but she..." He paused. "She lashed out, almost as if she didn't recognize us as people." He guided me to a small side room. There, on a narrow wooden bench, sat a figure in dusty clothes. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Occasionally, she'd twitch in a slow, stiff manner. I approached, cautiously. The woman neither looked up nor made a sound. Her skin had a pale grey tint that reminded me of an old bruise. As I stepped closer, she slid off the bench and tried to reach for me with shaky arms. Father Delgado gently blocked her path with a chair. She pushed against it, seemingly oblivious to the pain that might cause. I uttered the first thought that came to mind. "She looks half dead." Delgado lowered his eyes, admitting that was exactly what he feared. But how do you help a person who behaves like that? We had no idea if it was disease, madness, or something worse. By the time I left the mission, the midday sun was scorching overhead, and I felt the dryness in my throat. I debated riding back to my cabin, but a knot of townsfolk shouting near the funeral parlor drew my attention. Ramirez and Sons, our local undertaker, was usually quiet. Today it was anything but. A cluster of worried residents hovered at the doorway. I recognized Ramirez's teenage son, who looked shaken. He waved at me frantically, urging me inside. I hesitated for a second, but I sensed the urgency. Once I crossed that threshold, the smell of embalming fluid hit my nostrils, sharp and chemical. Inside, Ramirez stood near a table with a long shape draped under a sheet. His eyes widened when he spotted me, as though relieved to see someone who might handle a gun if need be. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He lifted the sheet enough to show me a face, pale, eyes half-lidded, a bullet hole in the chest. Looked like it had been there a while, not fresh. Yet the body twitched, a single spasm in one arm. I blinked, thinking maybe the heat had me seeing things. But Ramirez whispered, "He was brought in last night. No pulse, no breath. But look at him. He's moving." A ripple of shock went through the small group of onlookers. One older woman crossed herself. Another man mumbled about curses. I forced myself to remain calm. The body's movements were slow and irregular, but they weren't random nerve twitches either. It looked like he was fighting to move despite being in that state. "By all rights, he should be dead," Ramirez said quietly. And yet here we are. I stepped back, noticing that a few people were inching closer, trying to see. The body's arm tremored again, then fell still. That was the final sign I needed. These rumors about pale wanderers weren't exaggerations. Something beyond normal understanding was happening. Now, I know you're thinking, Tom, are you sure you didn't just have too much whiskey that day? Believe me, I've had more than my share of nights where the corners of my memory get fuzzy. But this wasn't that. I had never seen anything like it, and I'd seen some strange things riding across this wide country. No one wanted to say the word undead. That sounded too much like an old wives' tale. But we had to call them something. Some folks said, the pale ones. Others said, stirrers. A few Spanish-speaking ranchers used the word alzados, meaning those who have risen. The term that stuck in my mind was the risen, because it captured the horror of what they seemed to be. Let me tell you, watching that body move on the undertaker's slab made me want to drop everything and run. But I'd learned long ago that you can't outrun your troubles. They have a way of finding you. Besides, these were my neighbors. Good people who didn't deserve whatever was happening. I helped Ramirez cover the body again. He insisted on locking it in a storage chamber, fearing it might get up. That sounded dramatic, but after what I'd seen, I couldn't argue. A half-dozen men helped drag it to a side room and bolt the door. No one spoke above a whisper. Then Ramirez's son locked up the parlor from the outside, leaving a sign that said, closed for the day. Word spread fast. By mid-afternoon, it seemed every soul in El Cielo had heard about the events. Some version of them anyway. A few folks wanted to flee immediately. Others insisted we band together. Wyatt, the barkeep, suggested an impromptu meeting at the saloon so people could share what they'd seen. Father Delgado and Dr. Moore, our lone physician, agreed. They hoped it might calm folks down, or at least help us form a plan. The saloon that evening was as crowded as I'd ever seen it, with families huddled in corners, ranchers leaning on the bar, and a handful of folks clutching shotguns or rifles like security blankets. Wyatt tried to keep the peace. People argued. Some shouted that we needed to seal the town, keep out strangers, or at least keep watch on the roads. Others demanded a quarantine or to lock away anyone who showed signs of this condition. Dr. Moore, an older fellow who'd come from back east, tried to sound official. We might be dealing with a contagion, he said. Locking up the afflicted could save us. But we had few resources. No real sheriff, no jail, just a battered set of cells left over from an old outpost that had been abandoned decades ago. Father Delgado quietly reminded everyone to show compassion. He recounted the woman in the mission, how she seemed lost, not a monster. But a rancher snapped back. Not a monster? She attacked Delgado when he tried to help her. The crowd grumbled in agreement. Tensions rose until Wyatt banged a mug on the bar, calling for calm. I cleared my throat. I saw the body in Ramirez's place move, I said. And I saw that woman in the mission too. I don't know what's happening, but I'll say this. If they show aggression, we can't stand by with empty hands. We need a plan for defense. That turned a lot of heads in my direction. I guess word had gotten around that I was once handy with a revolver. They wanted me to advise them. Me, a washed-up gunslinger who'd been minding his own business on a patch of land outside town. I took a breath, scanning the crowd. We should keep an eye on the roads, post a watch near the main street. If we see anything, anyone, acting like these risen, we need a way to contain them without panic. The barkeep nodded. Dr. Moore mumbled something about sedation, but we didn't have enough supplies for that. Some folks insisted only a bullet between the eyes would do the job. We got in a heated debate about that. Nobody liked the idea of firing on what might be a living person. The meeting ended without a firm resolution, but at least we established watch shifts for the night. After the meeting broke up, families drifted back to their homes, locking doors behind them. A few men volunteered to patrol the edges of town. I decided to stay at the saloon for a bit, just to see if anything else popped up. I sat by the bar, nursing a half shot of whiskey, while Wyatt tidied up. Neither of us spoke much. We were both listening for any sound outside, any sign of trouble. Some time after the moon rose, a ranch hand named Eduardo burst in, out of breath. "They're out there," he gasped. "Near the old well on the south side. 2 of them, maybe 3. That's all it took to stir folks who were still awake. Wyatt, me, and a couple of others grabbed our weapons and hurried out. The night air clung to the skin, and a faint breeze rattled loose shutters. We followed Eduardo to the well, a short stone structure just at the edge of town. Sure enough, we spotted 2 figures in the moonlight. They moved slowly, as though disoriented, but they advanced with a steady inevitability. One had a noticeable limp, the other seemed to drag an arm as if it was useless. I tried calling out, "Hey there, friend. You lost?" No answer. The pair shambled closer. Even in the dim moonlight, I saw that their faces were slack, eyes half-lidded. One had a cloth bandage around the chest, old, stained. The shape of the bandage suggested a bullet wound from a prior day. Wyatt hissed under his breath. Eduardo clutched a rifle but seemed afraid to raise it. The figures drew nearer. Finally, Wyatt said, "Stop, right there," in a loud, firm voice. They didn't slow. With every step, we got a clearer view of their unnatural condition. Skin tinted a greyish hue, clothing torn and dusty, no sign of normal awareness in their eyes. When they got within a few yards, the tension snapped. A rancher behind me fired a warning shot into the dirt. The pair flinched at the noise but kept coming. I could sense them homing in on the group, as if drawn by the living presence. Another shot rang out, this time hitting the closer figure in the torso. It stumbled, paused, then continued forward, unsteady but determined. Folks reeled back, dread spreading in the group. I had seen enough. I stepped forward, aimed at the second figure's head, and squeezed the trigger of my revolver. The muzzle flash lit the night for a fraction of a second. The figure collapsed. The first one, injured in the torso, turned toward me. I steadied my grip, exhaled, and fired again. The bullet caught it high, near the collar. It slumped but still squirmed. Another man fired a shotgun, finishing the job. We stood there, hearts hammering, well, if we want to speak figuratively, uncertain if more of them lurked in the darkness. The night felt still again. Slowly, we moved closer. Neither figure stirred now. It felt wrong to do that to what might have once been normal folks, but we had no alternative. They showed no sign of comprehension, no sign of stopping unless forced. One of the men quietly mumbled a prayer. We decided to leave the bodies there until daylight, rather than trying to move them at night. That was my first direct confrontation with the Risen. Even though it was over quickly, it sank into my thoughts. I recalled the look in their eyes as they advanced. Not anger or fear, just blankness. It was almost like hunger without emotion. I can't describe it any better than that. Back at the saloon, no one felt like sleeping. Word spread that shots were fired, and 2 more of these pale wanderers were put down. A half-dozen worried folks arrived asking if we were safe, if more were coming. Everyone had the same unspoken question. Were the Risen a handful of isolated cases, or was this the start of something bigger? Wyatt poured me a half glass of whiskey on the house, and I sipped it slowly, thinking about how events had escalated in a single afternoon. Less than 12 hours ago, I was just minding my business, planning to buy nails and flour. Now I was dealing with what felt like a plague of walking corpses. Part of me wanted to saddle up and get as far away as possible, but I couldn't leave these folks behind to fend for themselves. Let me just say, that night was one of the longest in my life. Several armed volunteers patrolled the perimeter of town, lanterns bobbing in the darkness. The temperature dropped, but the dread lingered. Occasionally someone yelled that they spotted movement, only to find a stray coyote or tumbleweed. Once in a while, though, they stumbled on the real thing, a single Risen or a pair wandering aimlessly across the sand. We tried not to shoot unless they came too close. We didn't want to waste ammunition or draw more attention with gunfire, but sometimes it couldn't be helped. I lost count of how many times I heard a distant crack of a rifle. Each time, it made me clench my fists, anticipating another encounter. By dawn, the watchers reported that at least a dozen risen were found near El Cielo. No one had heard of such a thing. Typically, a border town might get the occasional band of outlaws or a wave of travelers in need of rest, but never something like this. It felt like the desert was coughing up its dead. Come morning, everyone was exhausted, but there was no rest. We had to figure out a plan, because if this continued, we'd run out of ammo or lose our nerve. Tensions soared. Arguments broke out. Some folks wanted to pack up and leave immediately. Others insisted we barricade ourselves in. The truth was, neither option guaranteed safety. If these risen were scattered all across the region, running might just land you in their path. Anyway, as I'm telling you this story over a few drinks, you can imagine me slumped at a bar, weary from a night of fighting something that shouldn't exist. That's exactly how I was come morning. Bleary-eyed, uncertain, but forced to keep moving because what choice did I have? Word soon reached us that Dr. Moore was holed up in his little clinic with a few injured townsfolk, trying to treat their wounds. Some had been scratched or bitten by the risen, nothing too severe, but enough to make them worry. The biggest question on everyone's lips was, if you get scratched, does that turn you into one of them? We didn't know. Dr. Moore guessed that if it was some kind of infection, it might spread that way. But he wasn't sure. Father Delgado, meanwhile, had turned the mission into a sanctuary for families who felt unsafe in their homes. He gathered them in the main chapel, praying for protection. A few ranchers took watch near the courtyard, setting up a makeshift barricade. It wasn't much, but they wanted to feel like they could protect their loved ones. Me? I spent most of that day helping Wyatt coordinate watch shifts in different parts of town. One group at the main street, another near the well, a few near the mission, and a last group scanning the roads leading out. We tried to get folks with decent aim to stand guard. We posted kids and elders inside sturdy buildings. It was as close to an organized defense as we could manage. By midday, the sun was punishing. People dozed in whatever shade they could find between shifts. But no one got real rest. The tension was thick enough to choke on. What truly worried us was the news from folks riding in from outlying ranches, saying they'd seen more risen drifting across the desert. Some reported them in small groups, others alone. A stagecoach that was supposed to arrive never showed up. Maybe it got word and turned back, or maybe something worse happened. A traveling pair of prospectors stumbled into El Cielo around noon, looking ragged. They said they'd been attacked by a pack of these things near Hueco tanks. One of them was scratched up pretty bad, though he insisted he was fine. They told us that the risen didn't respond to shouts or warnings, just pressed on, arms out, as if drawn to anything breathing. The prospectors also mentioned that they'd tried shooting them in the legs, but it barely slowed them. Their only success was a shot to the head, or a strike that destroyed whatever force kept them moving. Hearing that chilled a lot of folks. We realized we were up against something that normal logic wouldn't fix. By late afternoon, we decided to form a rough defensive perimeter around the heart of town. Jenkins, the blacksmith, welded together some metal scraps for barriers near the stables. Others used wooden planks to block off narrow alleys. It wasn't a perfect system, but it might funnel any intruders into more open areas where watchers could see them coming. A few wagons got loaded with supplies in case we needed to make a quick evacuation. The folks who planned to stay insisted it was better to hold out than risk the open desert. The ones who favored leaving started organizing in small caravans, hoping to ride out at first light, making a dash for Fort Quitman or somewhere bigger like El Paso. But none of them looked confident. The desert can be cruel on a good day. Add in these risen, and it felt like a suicide mission. In the midst of all this, I found myself singled out by the townspeople again and again. Tom, what do we do? Tom, have you dealt with anything like this before? I had no real answers. I could offer basic strategy, keep watch, aim carefully, don't panic, but this was beyond any gunfight I'd seen. I did my best to keep a level head, though inside I felt the same creeping dread they did. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, painting the sky a deep orange, we readied ourselves for another rough night. Volunteers took positions around the saloon, the mission, and the perimeter. More lanterns were distributed. Ammunition was counted. Father Delgado said a few words in the mission courtyard, not quite a service, more like a plea for mercy. Some folks found comfort in that. Me, I paced near the main street, rifle in hand. My mind kept drifting to the question of how this outbreak started. Was it a disease? A curse? Could it pass from one person to another? Or was it something that happened randomly to the deceased out in the desert? No one knew. The closest thing we had to knowledge was that those who died under suspicious circumstances might come back as arisen. But that was rumor, not fact. Wyatt stepped up beside me, clearing his throat. "Tom," he said softly, "I never asked for this. I'm just a barkeep." I gave him a weary smile. "I'm just an old gunslinger, but here we are." He nodded, forced a half chuckle. Then he turned grim. "If we don't make it—" "Don't talk like that," I interrupted. "We'll make it. Might not be easy, but we'll make it." He sighed. "Well, I appreciate you is all. We need someone who knows how to keep a cool head when the lead starts flying." We exchanged a silent understanding. Then the final sliver of sun vanished. Darkness took hold, and once again we braced ourselves. Sometimes trouble comes in a slow trickle. Other times, it arrives in a sudden wave. That second night in El Cielo, it came like a wave. Maybe the risen moved more freely under cover of darkness, or maybe there were simply more of them in the area now. But not long after the stars blinked into view, watchers on the outskirts started shouting. A frantic ring of the saloon's old handbell signaled that multiple figures were approaching from the east. Then a second alarm sounded near the blacksmith's shop. Within minutes, gunfire crackled across the night. Shouts echoed through the streets. Lanterns bobbed as defenders rushed from one spot to another. The shadows made it hard to see, but we glimpsed forms pushing against our makeshift barriers. I found myself near the blacksmith's place, where a group of 3 or 4 risen tried to muscle past a row of nailed planks. They pressed forward, arms outstretched. The blacksmith and 2 ranchers fired, each shot briefly illuminating the area. One risen fell, only to twitch and rise again. Another reeled back from a bullet, but kept shambling forward until Jenkins smashed it with a metal bar, knocking it down. Even then it thrashed. The ranchers fired more shots, muzzle flashes lighting up faces grim with resolve. From the corner of my eye, I saw 2 risen slip around the barrier, heading toward the stable. I yelled a warning, sprinted over, and fired my revolver. One dropped. The other kept moving. My second shot missed, hitting the stable wall, sending splinters flying. Before it closed the distance, I managed a third shot, and it collapsed, lifeless at last. Lantern light revealed more silhouettes drifting from the east. Some walked with a limp. Others had injuries that would have killed a living person, but none of them seemed to care. The defenders kept firing. At times I caught glimpses of a rancher swinging a torch, or a father guiding his family away to a safer spot. The noise of it all was overwhelming. Shouting, shooting, scraping, stumbling. Yet the risen never made normal vocal sounds, just occasional low moans or hisses. Despite our defenses, a few of the risen managed to slip into town via alleys or side streets. Some watchers found themselves cornered in tight spots where it was hard to aim without hitting each other. Father Delgado, pinned near the mission gate, used a large wooden cross as a makeshift barrier, pressing it forward to keep a risen at bay until a rancher came to his aid. Over near the saloon, I heard Wyatt calling for help. I got there in time to see 3 of them approaching from behind a water trough. Wyatt fired his shotgun, the blast lighting the night for a heartbeat. One risen fell. Another lunged toward Wyatt, arms flailing. He staggered back, frantically reloading. I took a shot at the second one, the bullet striking near its shoulder, spinning it around. Before it could recover, Wyatt finished reloading and fired again, dropping it. The third turned, sensing movement, but a local store clerk had circled around with a pitchfork, jabbing it in the side long enough for us to land another shot. The chaos was all around us. My mouth felt parched, as if I'd swallowed desert sand. The fear was real, but I tried to stay focused on each threat, step by step, shot by shot. The older I get, the more I realize that's all you can do in a crisis. Keep your wits, handle what's in front of you, hope you come out on the other side. Eventually the wave subsided, or maybe we'd just taken down enough of them that the immediate onslaught ended. Darkness settled again, the muzzle flashes died away, and an eerie silence draped the streets. One by one folks emerged, checking on each other, searching for wounded. I spotted Dr. Moore and a helper rushing to treat a rancher who'd been knocked down by a risen. He hadn't been bitten, just bruised. Another man limped from a twisted ankle. Overall, we'd managed to avoid any serious new injuries, at least in our group. We were lucky. We tried to count how many we'd put down. Hard to get an exact figure in the dark, but it had to be over a dozen. We left the bodies where they fell, planning to move them at first light. A few watchers were still posted, scanning for stragglers. The rest huddled in small clusters around lanterns, reloading weapons, or trembling from the shock of what they'd just lived through. That's when it sank in. For the second night in a row, we'd fought off an incursion of unnatural foes, and we were still standing. But how many more times could we do this before something gave? Wyatt, pale-faced and drenched in sweat, pulled me aside. "Tom," he rasped, "I can't do another night like this. We're not soldiers." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "None of us are, but we've made it this far." He looked around at the battered saloon, broken furniture used as barricades. "Maybe we should leave," he muttered. "Head for the fort while we still can." I nodded slowly. Some folks might, but the roads might have more of these risen than we can handle. At least here we have numbers and shelter. He grimaced. "What if the risen keep coming every night? We'll run out of ammo, or we'll lose track of them. This might be hopeless." I wished I had a comforting lie, but I didn't. "We'll decide come morning," I said. "For tonight we rest what we can. If more arrive, we do our best." He closed his eyes a moment, then nodded. "You're right. Might as well try." Just before dawn, a group of ranchers found something chilling. A small cluster of risen deeper in the desert, about a quarter-mile out, milling aimlessly around what looked like the remains of a campsite. The ranchers didn't linger to investigate, but they surmised that some travelers might have been overtaken in the night. That sent a ripple of alarm through the town. It meant these attacks weren't contained to us. They were happening wherever unlucky souls encountered these wanderers. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, it revealed the battered state of El Cielo. Broken fences, bullet holes in walls, spent shells scattered across the ground. The bodies of the risen lay motionless in the streets, unmoving in the daylight. A group of men and I carefully gathered them, dragging them outside of town to a shallow ditch. Father Delgado insisted on some kind of respectful practice, but few had the stomach for anything more elaborate than covering them with tarps. A few townsfolk hovered, clearly torn between pity and revulsion. We realized we'd survived 12 hours. Well, more like 36 if you counted from the previous day. But those first 12 were the real turning point. That was when everyone realized the risen weren't just a rumor, and once you cross that line, there's no going back to normal life. "Ah, I see you're still here, listening. Sometimes folks wander off once the story gets too heavy. Thank you for letting me talk. I know it sounds impossible, but you asked about El Cielo, and I told you I was there. Truth be told, I left a few days after that second night. Some families stayed behind, determined to hold their ground. Others formed caravans and hit the road. Me? I rode out at sunrise with a small group headed for Fort Quitman. We figured safety in numbers. Did we run into more risen on the way? We saw a few in the distance but avoided direct contact, thank the heavens. Eventually, I drifted from place to place, never truly settling. Word around the region was that folks from El Cielo scattered, some finding refuge in bigger towns, others traveling north. I heard rumors the army eventually sent a patrol to investigate. I never learned the final fate of the place. Part of me fears the Risen might still roam those dusty streets, or maybe the defenders destroyed them all. Either way, I learned enough to know that the stories traveling around are no tall tale, and that, friend, is what happened to me. Sure, I've seen brawls, shootouts, the harsh side of frontier living, but nothing put the fear of the unknown in my gut like encountering those grey-eyed wanderers. I still have nights where I dream about them drifting through the desert, aimless and unstoppable, searching for whatever life they can claim. Now, I don't know how this all sits with you. Maybe you're one of those modern types who thinks there's a rational explanation. Maybe it's a disease, a fungus, or some sort of rare infection that folks just haven't diagnosed. Me, I'm not a doctor. All I know is what I saw, and that was enough to shake me for the rest of my days. You might be wondering why I share this story in a saloon with a stranger. Truth is, I've seen new rumors pop up in other towns, whispers of distant villages facing similar troubles. Folks dismiss them, the same way they dismissed the first rumors about El Cielo. I figure if even one person takes this seriously, maybe they won't be caught off guard if they ever meet a Risen themselves. I've met a few who claim they've run into similar things along the Rio Grande. They go by different names: desert husks, night stumblers, and so forth. Whatever you call them, the principle's the same. They're not truly alive, but they're not resting either. They'll keep coming until you stop them for good. Now, I'm not here to spark panic, just telling you that if ever you see a figure wandering with blank eyes, ignoring warnings, shrugging off injuries, you'd best be cautious. Folks in El Cielo learned that the hard way. Anyway, that's how I survived the first 12 hours, and a few more of that outbreak. If your glass is still half full, I'd be happy to raise a toast with you. To the desert nights, the luck that sometimes saves us, and to the memory of all those in El Cielo who stood their ground. Some folks ask if there's a cure. I couldn't tell you. Dr. Moore never found a remedy, far as I know. He was too busy patching up the living. Maybe somewhere down the line, a traveling doctor or scientist discovered something. But by the time I'd left, we had no clue how to reverse whatever caused a body to rise and keep walking. I do hold on to one bit of optimism. For each Risen we encountered, there were at least 3 living souls helping one another. The families that banded together, neighbors who shared water and ammunition, even total strangers who joined the fight. If you look past the horror, you'll see folks can rise to the occasion too, just in a different way. That's why part of me believes El Cielo might still stand. Maybe the ones who stayed behind fortified the place good and proper, kept it safe until the outbreak died down. Could be they found a solution. I'd like to think so anyway. As the hours wore on that day, when we realized we'd lived through the worst of it, or so we thought, folks sat around the mission, battered but alive, passing around water canteens and small bits of dried meat. That memory sticks with me. People from all walks, comforting each other after surviving something that seemed beyond natural law. I said my farewells, loaded my horse, and rode off with that small caravan. Each time we caught sight of a figure in the distance, we tensed up, but none drew close enough to cause trouble. After a few days, we reached Fort Quitman, where an officer listened to our story with raised eyebrows. I'm not sure if he believed us, but he let us stay a night and resupply. Then we went our separate ways. I drifted from one place to another, picking up odd jobs, never fully settling down. Part of me kept looking back, remembering those 12 hours. And that, my friend, is the gist of it. You can call it a fable if you want, but once you've seen those eyes, the eyes of a body that should be resting in the earth, you can't forget it. When I close mine, sometimes I still see their shapes lumbering across the desert. Now about that drink you promised me. Mind if I refill my glass? A tale like that leaves a man with a thirst, and I've run through most of my words for the night. Maybe we should toast again, to the hope that none of us ever see the risen outside our windows. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.